Hello there my RPG lovers and welcome to another video. Even before the remastered version of Kingdoms of Amalur came out in late 2020, the new DLC called Fatesworn was already announced with a cinematic trailer. This wasn't a huge surprise to me because this is not the first time when THQ Nordic released a brand new DLC for a pretty old game. Titan Quest, an action RPG that came out in 2006, received a couple of new DLCs as well as the port to current-gen consoles. I think it's great when older games receive this kind of treatment. It gives you a strong reason to revisit the game for another playthrough and experience some brand new content along the way. And you know what else is great? Getting a free gaming browser. Opera GX is a special version of Opera browser built specifically for gamers. It has a bunch of highly customizable gaming features. If you're the person who keeps a ton of tabs open while gaming, GX Control feature will prevent your PC from losing any gaming performance. You can manually adjust the CPU and RAM usage that you are willing to let the browser use. And you can also limit the network bandwidth to gain performance in games and streams. Compared to Google Chrome for example, Opera GX uses a lot less network bandwidth, as you can see for yourself. Besides the customizable gaming options, Opera GX allows you to fully customize how the browser looks. There are different themes, wallpapers and colors. Ultraviolet and dark preset is what I personally prefer because it's really easy for the eye. Another feature that gamers will definitely appreciate is the GX Corner. It allows you to stay up to date with free games on various gaming platforms, as well as gaming news and upcoming games on the calendar. Opera GX is also available on iOS and Android mobile devices, and it can be connected to the desktop version. Download this free browser by using my link in the description or from the pinned comment down below. Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning was a bit underwhelming remaster. Maybe not for me personally because it gave me a strong reason to play the game again, especially when it came out on Nintendo Switch. And I was just happy to hear people talk about this underrated action RPG again after so many years. You can check out a couple of videos I did when the remaster came out if you're interested. Anyway, Fatesworn expansion is definitely the main reason for the existence of this remaster. That's why I think that it was a better idea to release the remaster and the DLC at the same time, but it is what it is. After playing this DLC for about 15 hours, I can say without a doubt that it's a true love letter to old fans of this game. However, the DLC is not without its problems. But let's start from the beginning.
Amalur is always changing, and as every ballad ends, another one begins.
The story in this expansion starts right after the main story of the game, so you should know that you won't be able to play it until you're done with the main storyline. And again, that also reminds me of the newest expansion for Titan Quest. It seems like THQ Nordic has this universal philosophy for DLCs. You have to beat the main game in order to play the DLC. Anyway, Fatesworn DLC has a brand new map, which is implemented just like two other maps from previous DLCs, Teeth of Narrows and The Legend of Dead Kell. This place is called Mitros, and it has a nice variety of terrain that you're going to explore. You learn that Niskaru, one of the main enemy types in the base game, has been spawning through chaos portals. Oh yeah, you should know that you're going to use the word chaos a lot, because it's basically the main theme of this DLC.
In chaos magic.
Chaos. Chaos worshippers. Chaos. Chaos.
Anyway, your actions from the main storyline are one of the main reasons for these newly discovered threats. Your character is fateless, which is a big deal in this world because you defy the laws of nature.
You have done all of Amalur a great service, Fateless One.
But Niskaru are not the main problem here, even though you're going to fight like a ton of them. Telogrus, the Chaos God, is the reason for this new chain of events on Mitros, and your goal is to stop him.
We will build a new destiny together.
What kinda surprised me about the story of this DLC are some returning characters with the original voice actors, especially Agert the Fate Weaver, who we met shortly after the beginning of the game.
Try as I might, I can't see a fate for any of us.
And you can also recognize some other voice actors from the base game.
If my superiors found out, I'd be sacked. No question.
Which led me to believe that this DLC was possibly planned right from the beginning. What I mean by that is maybe THQ just used unreleased assets, at least when it comes to the voices. I'm not claiming this is the case, I'm just guessing here. If they actually managed to hire the same people to voice these characters, they really deserve a lot of praise for this because it's a lot harder than you think. Whatever the case may be, it's great to hear the same people who voice these characters in the original game. Speaking of voice acting, it's pretty good in general, not just when it comes to the old voice actors.
The Chaos Flame. I stole it from Ishara with my own hands, sacrificing my greatest tools to ensure Telogris' destruction.
There are a couple of exceptions here and there, but for the most part it's really decent. The original game was not amazing when it comes to voice acting, it was also pretty decent and serviceable. So the DLC is definitely faithful to the original game when it comes to this. The main story of the DLC is average at best and I don't have any problems with that. It's far from being bad, but it's actually really simple. You need to learn what you need to defeat the God of Chaos and just do it. It's really obvious that they came up with the main gameplay loop for the DLC first, and then they started to write the story around it. Which would make sense because the biggest strength of this game was always the gameplay. And we'll get to that soon, trust me. You don't have to follow the main quest religiously when you first arrive in Mithras. Even though I would highly recommend you to focus on the main quest in this case, because most of the side quests are not that interesting. To be honest, most of them are brain dead fetch quests. And I don't say that lightly because I don't think that fetch quests are fundamentally bad in RPGs. But Fatesworn DLC has one of the worst kinds of fetch quests. Go and kill X amount of things or collect X amount of stuff and come back. Yeah, brilliant. Some of them can seem like they have a deeper meaning until you realize you only have to kill a bigger monster than the quest initially requested. Like I said, it's really brain dead stuff, and most of them are actually tasks rather than side quests. Listen, I did a couple of them in total and I just gave up completely, so I might be wrong. Even if there are some good side quests, they are few and far between. But let's not pretend that the original game had amazing side quests, so this is just more of the same. Sure, some of them were a bit more interesting, but not by a wide margin. On the other hand, the main quest remains fairly interesting through the whole DLC. Not that much from the story perspective, because the DLC is clearly focused on those new chaos mechanics. Like I said, the story itself is really simple and predictable. The main quest tries to break the monotony with a couple of puzzles that you have to solve. They slow down your progression a bit, but I don't mind them and they're not really that hard. One of them took me a while to solve though, and I felt like an idiot when I learned what I have to do. What I didn't like when it comes to the main quest and some areas that you have to go through is the obsession with levers. I think I'm going to have nightmares about levers after this DLC. It's just a really overused mechanic, and I'm not even talking about the main gameplay loop in this DLC, which suffers from the same problem. There was this one area that was so unnecessarily convoluted and frustrating because you have to activate a ton of levers in order to progress. You have to go back and forth all the time. Not to mention that it felt extremely artificial because there is no way in hell this building can actually work like this. The majority of the main quest will require you to close the chaos portals, and yeah, you will see a lot of levers there as well. Speaking of chaos portals, this would be a good time to start talking about the gameplay. If you played Oblivion, chaos portals can instantly remind you of Oblivion gates. And while it's an interesting concept, it feels really repetitive for a couple of reasons. Before you can enter these portals, you first have to close a couple of nearby rifts, which are protected by a group of chaos monsters. I wouldn't have a problem with this at all if the DLC had enough new enemies to fight. But 95% of enemies that you're going to encounter are just reskins from the base game and they have the same fighting styles. The worst thing about this is the one and only quote-unquote boss monster that you're going to fight through the entire DLC, over and over and over again. In order to close the chaos portal, you need to find a lever, because of course you do, so you can open the next door and progress until you get to the final room. And I think there was only one time when Niskaru Horinax wasn't the boss at the end. It felt really lazy and repetitive. What I found hilarious is the final challenge that you get from Skald Atlas that's supposed to prepare you before you go and face the God of Chaos. Up to this point you killed at least 10 Niskaru Horinox in chaos portals, but she thinks that's not enough, so she summons another one. That's amazing. Putting the repetitive nature of this DLC aside, I actually like how the chaos mechanics work. At first, you won't be able to do any damage to chaos creatures because they're protected with chaos armor, which has a really distinctive purple color. I mentioned Skald Atlas, which is the weirdest name ever by the way, but she is one of the main characters in the story. She will provide you with materials that you need to craft new chaos weapons and armor, which you need to use against chaos creatures. If you don't have the crafting skill, her apprentice can craft things for you, so don't worry about that. Anyway, the main point of this is to destroy the chaos armor on enemies, and then you can start doing regular damage to their health. That means that you can switch to any weapon you prefer to use after you destroy their chaos armor, or you can just continue to use chaos weapons, whatever works for you. This creates an interesting little gameplay loop. The combat system in Kingdoms of Amalur is satisfying as ever, so adding a new mechanic on top of it feels refreshing. I was using a chaos two-handed sword and a regular epic mace which could heal me every time I land a killing blow. So I start the fight with a chaos greatsword, and just before I'm going to land a killing blow, I start swinging my mace. It just goes to show you that you can make some interesting playstyles, not to mention the deep character progression system from the base game. While the combat in this game is something that I always praised, it's definitely on the button mashing side. This is especially noticeable in Fatesworn because of the lack of new enemy types. There are a couple of new enemies in the DLC, like this big knight. But even this enemy is overused in the DLC, and it's not a very interesting fight, especially on very hard. Very hard is the new difficulty setting, which was added in the remaster. I actually predicted this new difficulty in one of my old videos because it was a logical thing to do in the remaster. I did some comparisons between difficulties, so you can check that out if you're interested. Anyway, new chaos weapons look really nice, and their aesthetics seem to be inspired by Lovecraft universe. The DLC also includes new armor sets and the new regular epic weapons as well. And let me remind you that the remaster fixed the aggressive RNG looting from the base game, so you have a much higher chance to complete armor sets in the remaster. And speaking of armor sets, there is a special trader in the DLC that can help you with that I won't spoil. There is one thing that I didn't mention when it comes to chaos portals. They're not only spawning in Mitros, but in the base game as well. It makes the map of the base game a little bit more dynamic. But I think it would be even better if chaos portals could spawn before you complete the main story. It wouldn't make sense though from the story perspective, but the game would have a nice optional side activity. When it comes to visuals, the game looks pretty much the same, but like I said before, the environments look really nice and colorful. You will discover a couple of new villages and cities as well, but the majority of DLC is revolved around dungeon crawling, so I didn't care that much to be honest. Not to say that these places look bad, they just lack a more serious purpose. So in terms of content in general, this DLC is pretty decent. 6+ hours is the estimated time you need to complete this DLC. To be honest, they are selling this short if you ask me. Like I said in the beginning, I played for about 15 hours and I skipped the majority of side activities. So I can imagine that you can even get around 17 hours if you plan to do everything and take your time. And I guess it kinda depends on the difficulty you're playing and how long it takes you to defeat enemies. The reason why I think that this is a love letter to old fans of the game is not because of the general quality of this DLC. And don't get me wrong, even with all its problems, I don't think this DLC is bad. If you didn't like this game for whatever reason, Fatesworn DLC will not change your minds. But if you're like me and you love the original game, Fatesworn DLC gives you a strong enough reason for another playthrough. Anyway, tell me your opinion about this DLC in the comments below, and do you plan to buy it? Don't forget to subscribe for more RPG content. If you want to support the channel in the long run, consider becoming a Patreon or a YouTube member. You can get your name on the end credits, as well as some other perks like early access to videos, Discord roles, my plans for future content, etc, etc. That will be all, and I'll see you in the next one.